will be done as audio as well. So, to quote the great Andrew McGee, if you want to find comics you enjoy, you should find and follow a writer, because writers are a bit like movie directors with stylistic choices and thematic leanings that you would love to see in different properties and scenarios. The former Dark Horse editor Amina Bennett once said that good comic book writers think in pictures as well as words. She maybe didn't say that once. She maybe said it loads of times, but I only ever heard her say it once. And she may have said it more than a few times, but I don't follow her around because I'm a total geek. But she is right. The medium of comic book writing is super hard. There is no precise way to do it. And if you follow the comic book mediums as closely as we do, you start to learn that every writer puts their story together and generates those pictures together differently than everyone else. And that alone can be quite fascinating. I would totally recommend, for example, David Cranagh, our very own David Cranagh. He has released scripts of his comic books, and they're quite fascinating just to see. As a comic book writer, as somebody that tries to do it himself from time to time, it's quite interesting seeing how other people write.
Yeah.
So the best comic writers out there are creating the foundations of art. Some of that art is genuinely life-changing. And as I said earlier, it's really, really hard to do. Trust me, as someone that sort of does it. This list is entirely subjective, and it isn't a top 10. It's simply 10 fantastic storytellers that we as a team would recommend you checking out. They're put in a random order, so it isn't like, though it's 10, it isn't a top 10. And they are but a drop in the ocean of loveliness that we will all continue to swim in. So let's get wet together. We are the Brewgooders, and here are the top 10 comic writers here are just 10 comic writers you should check out. So number 10 was John Wagner. John Wagner is a British comic writer, an American-born British comic writer who, alongside Pat Mills, helped revitalise British comics in the 1970s, and he continues to be active in the comic book industry today, occasionally also working in American comics. Best known probably as the co-creator alongside artist Carlos Esquire as the creator of Judge Dredd. In the 1980s, he was a co-writer. Him and co-writer Alan Grant wrote prolifically for IPC's 2000 AD, Battle, Eagle, Scream, and Roy of the Rovers. They were also part of that phenomenal squad of British writers that went over to America and started. I think the 80s British comic invasion would be what they called it. You know, you've got guys like Dave Pugh, you've got guys like Alan Grant, Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, but they were just Pat Mills, obviously. So when John Wagner went over, he wrote for the DC Comics Batman, created a series of Batman and Judge Dredd team-up comics, and he also over here started the British independent comic The Bogeyman, which was eventually turned into a TV series starring Robbie Coltrane. And Judge Dredd has been twice adapted for film, as we all know, with varying degrees of success. And also his graphic novel, A History of Violence, was adapted by visionary movie director David Cronenberg for the 2005 film with the same name, which had Aragorn. Yeah, Big Vig.
Aye.
So yeah, absolutely amazing caliber writer. In 2016, he teamed up again with Alan Grant to create a new comic for BHP Comics, a British comics organisation, I think based in Glasgow, drawn by Dan Cornwell, former guest of the Brewgooders. It's called Rock of the Reds, and it tells the story of a dangerous intergalactic outlaw, Rock of Arcady, who, while on the run, hides on the planet Earth by taking over the body and life of a troubled football star, Kyle Dixon. It's fucking quality. Anyone hasn't read Rock of the Reds, it's basically Roy of the Rovers mixed with sci-fi opera. It's just great.
Yeah.
About an alien that hides in a human's body and eventually that falls in love with football.
Mental.
It's mental, but very, very good. Described by Warren Ellis as probably the single most influential comic book writer in British comics. Wagner is also named as an influence by writers such as Alan Grant, who says he taught him everything he knows about comic writing, and guys like Alan Moore as well. So, yeah, that took me ages. That's number 10. Number 9 was one of your suggestions, was Scott Snyder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you have a blurb for that, or do you want me to try?
I do a blurb. Do you want to say something first, or do you want me to read my blurb and then you can tack on? Or
no, definitely. I want to hear what you've got to say.
So, Scott Snyder has written comics for both DC and Marvel, including best-selling series American Vampire, Batman, and Swamp Thing. He's one of the hardest writers in comics, I think. must be. Even if you go on his Wikipedia and just look at his credits, it's absolutely unreal. Like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stuff. Actually,
Mhm.
like if like you look at his Wikipedia and the alphabet, it puts all his writing credits in alphabetical order, and it's just nuts. There's like 20 A's, 20 B's, 20
Yeah.
C's.
Good
It's
God.
crazy. I would say for me, like I'm not as familiar with his writing. I know what he's done. I'm not a
Mhm.
massive mainstream comic reader, but I did engage with his writing quite heavily in 2017 when he shook the DC comic landscape to its very core with his Dark Knights Metal series.
All right. Okay.
um, I say Dark Knight Metal series, I would call it a saga. And he
Mhm.
created a number of characters, including alongside Greg Kupalo, the Batman Who Laughs.
Mhm.
So for me, and Scott Snyder, everyone just needs to go and check out the Batman Who Laughs. If I think one of the main reasons we formed this list was to try and create a like jump on point for folk who are like, we often
Yeah.
get asked by folk, oh, who should I be reading? What comic do you suggest? And
Mhm.
as I said about earlier, Andrew, as a comic book shop owner, I've heard him say it multiple times, you don't need to be checking out comic book characters, you need to be checking out comic book writers. Because
Yes.
actually, if you enjoy that writer, then you can check out anything he's done. And obviously, if you enjoy Scott Snyder's stuff, as I
Mhm.
know you do, as I do,
Yeah.
you can just look at his catalog and go, oh, that'll be interesting. I like his writing, so I want to see
Mhm.
what he does with this guy. And certainly, as I say, he created the Batman Who Laughs, who's going to be a big deal. I think he's already a big deal in comics, the Batman Who Laughs. But if you haven't checked him out yet, you should check him out now because he's going to be a big deal. He will be a future baddie in a movie, and you can be
Aye.
really smug about it when that happens. So if you check him out now, you can be like, oh, I know who the Batman Who Laughs is. um, yeah, that
Yeah.
was my book.
Awesome. My introduction to him, I think, came with the the DC New 52 sort of reboots, because I think that initially started off with Scott writing writing the Batman comics
Yeah.
with the Court of Owls.
Mm-hmm.
I think he also started with the reboot of Swamp Thing in the New 52,
Oh yeah.
maybe as well as Animal Man. But then eventually his main focus stayed on Batman, and Swamp Thing and Animal Man were then taken with other writers. But I just I always loved the visual and like the history of like Swamp Thing. So Scott Snyder's take on it was great. I really enjoyed it. Um, I think one of the main Batman stories that stood out was the Black Mirror.
Oh yeah.
So that was one of it was just like random paperbacks that was trade paperbacks I was buying, and it's purely because it had Scott Snyder's name on it.
Yeah.
And the American Vampire thing, I'm glad you mentioned that because I remember borrowing that from the libraries. I think that was either like Scott Snyder and maybe Stephen King
Oh yeah.
possibly had credits on that, or it was like Stephen King's idea, and Scott and that were kind of fleshing it out.
That happens quite a
Um,
lot in DC. They'll bring in guys to throw out ideas, and then
yeah.
they'll get other writers to do it.
Mhm.
So
So no, that's like well, whilst I do have a real limited knowledge when it comes to comic book writers, when I see names like Scott Snyder, Warren Ellis, Alan Moore, I'll tend to pay a little bit more attention to that
yeah.
than others.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And Scott Snyder is like, he's just really influential as well. I've not
I
got a
think
blurb
he's a
for this.
really good guy on Twitter too.
He,
Like
he
he
did
always seems really fair.
I think so. He's very rounded. He's also like there's not very. I've always felt like this in comic writing anyway. But as a comic book creator, or as a like somebody that's just kind of getting into comic book writing and creation, there's no gatekeeping. There's
Mhm.
unlike many other hobbies or interests or sort of cultures. Or fandoms. There's a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of like, whereas that doesn't exist in comic book writing. And it's guys like Scott Snyder who really push that out as well.
Apologize,
So
my dog's got a wee squeaky donut.
So I know we interviewed a couple of guys last year, who a guy Ben who is doing the Scott Snyder comic book class anthology, which basically Scott did a comic book writers online classes last year, and a group of guys led by Ben just decided that they wanted to put some sort of anthology together. Obviously, they networked through this writing group, and but Scott was happy for them to put their name on it as well. So they went to Scott and were like, met Scott Snyder and were saying, we've met through your writing classes and would like to do an anthology. Obviously, we would like to nod to the fact that it was your writing classes that brought us together. So could we call this the Scott Snyder Writing Class Anthology? And he was like, yeah. It's quite happy for them to do it. And it was a really successful Kickstarter. So anthologies can be a bit hit or miss on Kickstarter, and this was a really successful one. Obviously, the Scott Snyder name goes a long way, I think. So
yeah, it's a good selling point.
Yeah. And I don't think he asked for any money or that. He wasn't like asking for a take of like profits or so. Like he was just like, no, just take my name and go. Which is really good. The next comic writer I don't believe is like that, but he's a visionary and I love him. Is Alan Moore. You mentioned Alan Moore briefly there.
Yeah.
I deliberately put him quite early on in this list because he everyone knows who Alan Moore is. So my barb here is Alan Moore is one of the best comic writers ever. According to the website that I was using, but forgot the name of, he was DC's first British comic book writer. So obviously he was doing stuff in the UK, and DC brought him over because he was that good. Moore created fan favorite characters like fan favorite character books like Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and he wrote The Killing Joke, which is also one of Batman's sort of deeper, more like visceral character investigations and explorations. Okay, this is for the audio listeners and the thing, but here's a wee game for you. Pause this, grab a bit of paper, and write down what you would consider to be the 5 most important comics ever. Done? Okay. I bet you have at least one of the following 3. Or no, the following 4. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, From Hell, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. You should have at least one of them. He wrote all 4 of them. As I say, he wrote The Killing Joke, which is widely regarded as one of the best Batman stories ever. And he had a run of Swamp Thing, which is heralded more than 30 years later. It's up there as one of the best runs of Swamp Thing ever. I don't know many people who would lay claim to writing some of the most important comics ever, but he can. We all know where we were first. We all know where we first were when we discovered and started reading Watchmen. Just like we all remember the bit immediately after discovering Watchmen when our mum told us to put down that really expensive book and get out of Waterstones. So,
I remember.
Yeah, Alan Moore.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Alan Moore is he hates everything that's ever been produced that based on his work.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Disowns everything. If it's got his name on it, he disowns it.
Whilst I don't collect comic books, I do like reading them. I remember when I'm coming on the brewgooders now. I've got to get back in the habit of reading comics. And I just remember going to Andrew's shop and giving him half of my collection to trade in because it's like, did I read them? But out of that, I did keep all of my Alan Moore Swamp Thing books.
Yeah.
Because they're special. You've not read anything like that before. And I've only read half of the run. So I kind of get rid of it. I need to kind of get back into it, read the rest. I've got maybe the first 4 books, and it might be 6 or 7 that it goes on to.
Yeah, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong with the Swamp Thing run. I don't know that much about it, other than my understanding is he was just kind of a by the numbers character, Swamp Thing. Obviously, he had the tragic backstory, but it's Alan Moore's kind of direction that has defined the series going forward. And one of the things I found when I was compiling this list is how influential the comic writers we're looking at have had on other medium like films and television. And but my understanding of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is it is the basis of the TV series that came out for DC.
Oh, right. Yeah, I never touched it purely because I remember hearing it was getting cancelled. It was something like a really expensive set to run, and as soon as I hear something's cancelled, I'd feel like I can't no point putting time into it. Yeah, it's really tragic because I bet that would be a bloody brilliant show.
Yeah, and just in terms of there's so many shows like that, but yeah, that's certainly one of them. But yeah, even them like it's Alan, it's Neil Bailey saying that From Hell is one of his favourite books alongside V for Vendetta. I would put V for Vendetta in one of my favourite films as well. Like the book's great. The film's incredibly different, but like totally like removes the political aspects of many of the characters and makes it more of like a conservative Britain versus central left Labour Britain. It totally plays around with the politics and stuff, which are
Yeah,
quite radical in the book. But no, V for Vendetta is one of the best.
it's never been one of. I've not read the book. I've watched the film, but again, it just never grabbed me,
The
which is
best
really
the
weird.
best bits of the film are it's a funny one. The best bits of the film are the bits that are lifted straight from the comic.
Right.
Some of the, in my opinion, some of the bits that are more challenging are bits that they've converted because obviously they were trying to sell a Hollywood movie.
Aye.
Obviously, and I know the production was quite the production was kind of troubled as well because obviously there was that horrific bombing in London. I think
Oh, right.
the week before V for Vendetta was due to get released.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's.
You can't release a movie that's hero
That's
bombs London.
yeah, that's troublesome.
Yeah,
That's unfortunate.
but
The
no,
only thing I remember that movie is like the kick fuck out with Stephen Fry.
yeah, they do kick fuck out of Stephen Fry. Yeah, which is I quite like Stephen Fry, so I was kind of
Yeah,
gutted.
yes, and he does a lot of voices in Sandman, so it's been great hearing him.
Yeah,
But yeah, only memory of V from Vendetta is him getting his totties.
yeah, guess it's tough. But no, Alan Moore stuff's amazing. I do like Watchmen's Untouchable. I really like the Watchmen movie. Again, very it's really close to the book until obviously there's a couple of very strong key differences, but thematically and the vibe is very similar. The TV series for
Oh, I love the TV series.
sequel to the comic, though.
Yeah, aye.
Just can't quite. I think Alan Moore's legacy it can't really be refuted. One of my favorite stories ever was for my guest we had Dave Pugh on, who was the artist in Slain in the 80s, among many other things, and he was telling me and Colin a story about how he sat alongside Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore at a comic convention, and he heard they were kind of whispering, and he was like they were whispering about their new series, but they weren't really telling anybody what they were working on, and apparently Gibbons turned around and said, "Oh, we're doing this." We're going to be doing this Guy Fawkes thing after, but he's currently working on a thing where no, sorry, it was David Lloyd. David Lloyd was there and just saying, I'm doing this Guy Fawkes thing for him once he gets his head around this 9-panel book he's going to be doing with Dave Gibbons, and Pugh apparently turned around and went, "What do you mean 9 panels?" He was like, "Oh, the whole book's going to just be like three boxes, a 3x3 box, in each, with 9 panels in each page." And Pugh, who's like quite an influential British comic writer from that time, was like, "It's a fucking stupid idea." And obviously, that 9-panel page becomes like that 9-panel page book becomes one of the most influential comics ever made.
Yeah.
Watchmen. So fair enough. Also, that was aye, and that's Neil Steen agrees with the film, talking about V for Vendetta. I hope you're talking. I know Neil's a politician. I wonder if he's talking about the political aspect of that. Number 7, Warren Ellis, who so Warren Ellis has done a bit of everything. His first mainstream big break came with Marvel when he was writing Hellstrom, but soon after that he was heavily involved with the publisher's 2099 imprint, which obviously I think everybody, if anybody doesn't know what that is yet, they're going to be like, just wait till the new Spider-Man film. He took over Excalibur after that. This is still remembered for positive changes in directions. He's transitioned through DC and through to Image, becoming the man known for putting his unique signature on lines. Warren Ellis's whole vibe was that it seems to have been that he came in and took troubled lines and made them better. He revitalized old comics or tired characters and made them essential again. He's best known for the co-creator of several original comic series lines as well, including Dave Crana's favourite comic, Transmetropolitan. He did Global Frequency. He did Red, which obviously became a phenomenal set of movies in Red and Red 2. Who was in them? Was that Bruce Willis that was in the new ones? And
Yeah,
Morgan
Bruce Willis, Mary Louise Parker, John Malkovich.
Morgan Freeman in them, or have I made that up?
Yeah, I know Morgan Freeman. Yeah, then I think
great.
they threw in like Helen Mirren in the sequel, as you do.
As you do. He's a prolific comic writer. He's written several Marvel series, including Astonishing X-Men, Thunderbolts, Moon Knight. He wrote the Extremist story arc for Iron Man, which was the basis of Iron Man 3, the movie. Outside of comics, he's written work for television and video game platforms, and was a producer and main writer on Netflix's Castlevania anime series.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, just I was really hoping we were going to have a. I'm not as familiar. I've read Extremis. I've seen Extremis. I've seen Iron Man. I've seen Iron Man 3.
Mm-hmm.
There was also an Extremis movie that came out, like an animated movie. I think Marvel played around with. I don't. If somebody like corrects me if I've got this wrong. Maybe about 10, 15 years ago, Marvel did a series. I think before the MCU properly picked off, they just released movies, but they were like comic movies. So they weren't supremely well animated. It was always just kind of, it was kind of like on panel stuff that was kind of moving and drifting about.
All right.
I think it was supposed to be like evocative of like a live action comic book rather than a movie in its own medium. I remember watching a couple of them, and one of them was Extremis from Iron Man 3. So, the Extremis Iron Man story. Mm-hmm. Also, one like folk need to tell me if I'm wrong about this. I don't know where this came from. This is totally just cut my mind. There was one that was like, is it Red Sun, which was the
that was Superman one,
the alternative world. Yeah, there was loads of these things, but yeah, I do certainly remember discovering Warren Ellis through the Extremis one, and obviously I was hoping to get Dave Crana on because he is a massive fan of Transmetropolitan. That's like his favorite.
I've heard of it. I've never read it myself, but I was a big fan of his Moon Knight run.
Yeah.
Clearly my dog isn't, but okay, I apologize. But his Moon Knight run, it was brilliant. Each issue, it was stylish. It would play with the fourth wall. There was one issue where it just played around with like 9 panels. It would be maybe like one panel to begin with, and then the next panel is almost like it was looking at a building. You're looking into the windows of the building, and by the end of it, it's like Moon Knight going through each panel, trying to escape these people, and it was just stuff like you never imagined what you could do with a comic, and it really got me interested in the Moon Knight character. And when Marvel were going to announce a miniseries, like, I hope it follows the Warren Ellis run, because it was kind of like Sherlock Holmes one issue, then he lost his mind the next issue, and then it was all the different stages of Moon Knight, where he is kind of like the White Knight, Superman, Batman style superhero, and then the other ones he looks like Robert Downey Jr. from the Sherlock Holmes movies, but it was brilliant, and I did follow him for a while with what other books came after it, but I can't remember the series. I feel it was Karnak or something. It was like another hero that I wasn't aware of, but Warren Ellis was writing it, so I decided, is it right? I'll follow it. Let's see where it goes from here. And he's done a lot more. I've only went as far as maybe following 2 series with him, but now I kind of actively search like library catalogs just to see if they have any Warren Ellis kicking about.
That speaks for itself. That's the whole point of this list, is just that aspect, is finding somebody. One of my personal favorite writers is Kieran Gillen. But he's our next list, and he's a British comic book writer and former video game and music journalist. He's probably best known for Phonogram and The Wicked and the Divine. But he's got loads of stuff that I discovered him. He did a run for Marvel as Journey into Mystery, which I really enjoyed. But he's got work with Image, obviously, Wicked and Divine. he co-created alongside Jamie McKelvey, which is I say on Image. He did Marvel stuff, Journey into Mystery. He did Uncanny X-Men. He did Young Avengers, Eternals. I think his Eternals run is a basis for the movie. Straight away did it, and it might be. My opinion is it is, or my understanding it is, but I'm wrong. Like he can totally kill me in the comics. And he did a Darth Vader run where he as part of that Darth Vader run, he co-created the character Dr. Aphra. I was hoping that Andrew was here or Cole was here to know what that was, but certainly seems to be. I think again, I'm not sure if Dr. Aphra is like a character that he maybe created in the comics and then it's translated somewhere else. But and yeah, at the time of this video's recording, he's got a story. He's doing the first part of the new Marvel event, which is called The Sins of Sinister.
All right.
Which I think is like Mr. Sinister changes reality, and this series follows what that looks like 10, 100, and 1,000 years. What that reality would look like. He's writing a story. He's writing a story or a mini series within this event called Immoral X-Men, which it is out this month. So yeah, if you want to, I thought that's quite cool. These Marvel events are quite cool. They're expensive, but a good comic event is a good jump on point. If you're like what comics should I be reading? Well, pick a writer, check this guy Kieran Gillen. And again, like these sort of series like Wicked and Divine, Wicked and the Divine, you can start with that, and if you enjoy it, you're like, well, actually, he's done X-Men, so check that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Characters, it's this writer doing them. And that kind of brings me on to the next guy, Ram V. I laughed when Andrew put this name down because we've met Ram. He's a really, really good guy. And he's a phenomenally gifted comic writer. I've got 2 of his books, and they're 2 of my favorite comics. And I'm actually unsure why I don't own any of his other stuff.
Right.
So Ram V is an Eisner-nominated award-winning author and creator of graphic comics and novels such as Gravity's Wall, These Savage Shores, which is phenomenal, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, and the Eisner-winning Blue and Green. Like, if anybody, like, I forget about Blue and Green because Colin lent it to me. I read it, I loved it, and I gave it back. And then I've been to Harrogate's Thought Bubble twice, and Ram's been there, and I've been meaning to buy Blue and Green both times and just haven't. Stunning book. I say Eisner winning. He's been publishing books. He's only been publishing books since 2016, but he's worked on to garner critical and popular success, including winning multiple awards. Apart from creating his original work, which is great, he's also written for iconic characters and titles such as Swamp Thing, Justice League Dark, Catwoman, Venom. He's currently the Venom/Carnage writer for Marvel. And I've also stood behind him in a queue for pints and Hangate. But he's so handsome, man. He's so handsome that I avoided eye contact and didn't say hi.
That's it. Your life would not be the same again if you did make eye contact.
Oh, well, I was stood behind him and James Tynion, who isn't on this list because he's going to be on the next 10 writers you should be checking out list. But James Tynion was also standing there, and I remember being like, "Oh my god, James Tynion and Ram V are like messaging folk like, oh my god, like 2 of the best comic writers in the world are currently standing right in front of me." And then I looked up, and James Tynion had turned around. The queues in the Harrogate pub that we're in the Majestic were really long. He turned around and looked right at me, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm going to have to engage in a conversation." He just looked at me and went, "Fucking queues, man." And then turned around. I was like, oh, everyone should be checking out Ram V stuff. As I say, if I've read These Savage Shores and Blue and Green, both incredible books, and you should check them out. But I'm annoyed that I haven't read Gravity's Wall or the Deaths of Layla Starr, so they're on my list, and I think it should be on everyone's else. He also has written. He wrote a short story in an anthology for Marvel where it was a small Wolverine story, and it was like 6 pages.
Yeah,
and it was really, really good. I enjoyed that too. So he's adept at writing like long and shorthand comics, you know. So, but yeah, so everyone should be checking out Ravi. Number 4, I put Brian K. Vaughan. So Saga's great. everyone should read Saga if you've not read it yet. I've not got anything more to say about Saga that's not already been said. Why the Last Man is superb. I don't understand why that was so poorly received on Disney Plus. The season of
Oh,
Why
the
the Last
series,
Man.
yeah,
Yeah.
they got cancelled after one, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly what you were saying earlier about that. Like, and actually, I love the comic. Like, it's incredible. But even I didn't check out I watched a couple episodes of this TV program and enjoyed it. But then I think it was one of those weird ones where it got released, and then after a couple of weeks they cancelled the second series. And it was like I don't know why it wasn't so well received, but I just remember being like, how is this not the like? When I remember reading the comic and then finding out they were going to do a TV series of it through Disney Plus, and I was like, this is great because actually before and then during the time he's been writing comics, Brian K. Vaughan, wrote for Lost. He wrote for the TV series, and Why the Last Man is superb. It could be event television all up there with Lost, The Walking Dead, that kind of stuff. I generally think it's of that the comic is of that caliber.
Yeah.
And how they fucked up that TV series when they had the comic writer as a TV writer. He could have helped. It's just such a weird one.
Yeah, that's it. It hurts. I mean, even that show Andrew recommended to us, was it like 1899 or 1849? Yeah. And that's cancelled now as well. So as soon as it's cancelled, it's like it kills my enthusiasm to watch it because
Cowboy Bebop, I was the same.
I was genuinely going to check that out because I thought this might be a good jumping on point and I could work my way back, and then they kind of just canned it. But that did look like an expensive show.
Yeah, I don't know what the market success is, but certainly. So obviously, Why the Last Man got cancelled by Disney Plus. Paper Girls is on Amazon.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
There's the Paper Girls comic series. I've read some of it. It will make you cry, and it will make you like punch the air and joy. It's great. It's a nice wee series, and I've not read it, but Runaways is many people's favorite form of any media. All written by Brian K. Vaughan.
That too. Yeah.
Like I've not read Runaways. I've read Saga. I've read the first graphic novel for Saga, and it is good, really good. But Focal. I think again, if you go like what we're saying about Alan Moore and what we're saying about other writers, like I've read Why the Last Man, I read Why the Last Man about 10 years ago before I really got into comics. A friend lent it to me, and I remember loving it, and for years it was my favorite comic until I actually just started discovering other comics. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, or 6, 7 years ago, when I wasn't reading comics properly, Jeff, what's your favorite comic? I would always just say Why the Last Man. So, but then Brian Vaughan's catalog is like that. Like folk will tell you Saga's their favorite comic. You will meet folk that will tell you Paper Girls is the best thing ever written, and then obviously Runaways. Like some folk are so passionately in love with Runaways as a series that this guy's an idea factory. Like alongside Alan Moore, like when you've got different books that different people say is their favorite story. Like lots in mass, you're clearly doing something right. So yeah, I would recommend. I personally would recommend Why Last Man, but like I think Paper Girls is a lot of people's first. Like I know lots of people that will turn around and say, "Check out Paper Girls. It's a great gateway comic. It's like a good like if you don't know where to start with comics, read Paper Girls." So that's Jonathan saying he's read the first 2 volumes of. I'm assuming Saga. It's brilliant. If it's not Saga you're talking about, Jonathan, please let us know. But yeah,
is Saga the game? The series that got turned into like a Telltale game for the Xbox.
I wasn't aware of that. Let me double check.
Is one of the characters like a? Oh god, it's something. It felt like it was of Wolf and Man. The video game was called.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there is a character in that. Let's see. Saga creator talks potential games adaptations. Yeah. I think so. It must have happened. So Saga the comic. No, I don't know. It's definitely. I'm looking online.
No, I think it might be. Is it Fables?
Yeah.
Is that another series? Yeah, maybe I'm.
But it certainly seems to be that like Telltale were talking about doing a Saga game. So yeah, I'm just. I played the Walking Dead Telltale game and was like, I don't know.
That game's bloody heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's like this is not what computer games are supposed to be.
I know. Choose between the child or the parent, which will die, and you're on a timer. I'm like, what? No, I've got to save Ducky.
Hold on, I've lost my list because I'm skipping between windows. Hold on. Oh my goodness, this is stressful. Shh.
Give me that squeaky donut, you wee bastard. Come here.
Great radio.
I'm puncturing all his toys. Come here.
Oh my goodness. Hold on.
I've got it. It's mine now. My donut. Not yours. Notice I was quiet. I'm going to have to stand here to hold this up to keep my dog quiet.
Yeah. I'm asking my computer to do too much. Talk nonsense for 2 seconds.
That's fine.
Sorry,
Holding this up. You're back? All good. Right.
Oh, it was you asking me if it was a Telltale series. No.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I sent you down a rabbit hole.
Back. I'm just.
There you go. I threw the donut out the room.
Just because, like,
I don't have it now.
Again, like,
goodbye, Charlie dog.
Again, it's just another creator that's contributed to different media, you know, or has created something that's been adapted into different stuff. And I think that was something that as I was compiling a list, I said earlier, that was like, oh my goodness, like the amount of folk that like the amount of stuff that these guys have created that this like they've made a comic and the story's been regarded as strong enough that they're like, yeah, it's been translated to other medium because they've been that impressed. So I say, but I wouldn't be surprised with I wouldn't be surprised with the Brian K. Vaughan stuff because he did write for telly, so he's probably certainly with Why the Last Man. There's a cinematic aspect to that comic book series, which probably translated quite easily to the TV when they were trying to convert it into TV show. Number 3, I put Mark Waid down. That was I think Andrew mentioned Mark Waid, but then so did John Bruce in our comments.
Right.
So Mark Waid, is there anything he can't do? He did Doom Patrol, Legion of Superheroes, Wonder Woman, and obviously he wrote Batman Gotham by Gaslight. He did an 8-year run in The Flash. Oh, yeah. He wrote something called Kingdom Come, which I believe is many people's favorite DC comic ever.
There's usually that likes to talk about that. What is it?
He was the editor-in-chief of Boom Studios, where he eventually was promoted to chief officer. And then he moved from there to Marvel, where he did projects including Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain America, Fantastic Four, and a run on Daredevil. And now he's currently has a residency with the Vatican writing the New Bible. I made that last one up, but you're not that surprised. He's I read.
I'll just wait until it's adapted to a Netflix series, then I'll watch it.
I read the Doom Patrol book, the first set of graphic novels. I'll correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but if he was responsible for the initial run of Doom Patrol, it is great. I think Grant Morrison was involved in that as well, actually. But that certain first that first 10 years of Doom Patrol, when it was effectively them taking shit characters or like unloved characters and turning them into something else, is great. And Doom Patrol is another one of those series where I'm like, I love the Doom Patrol series.
Yeah, I've always been meaning to kind of have a look at it because they've got their own version of Cyborg as well, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, it was they're in it's set in the same universe as DC Titans. You know the Titans.
Oh, the live action Titans.
Yeah, they're in the same world as that. I think maybe Swamp Things are maybe in that. Swamp Things in that sort of weird PG-13 DC universe. It's not the CW one.
Okay, aye. Because then you kind of had Constantine floating about there as well.
Yeah.
He was like an Amazon series that got cancelled, but he would appear in the CW shows or animated series.
They all exist within the DC. So there was an episode of, is it Crisis on Infinite Earths, that the DC did like the event a couple of years ago, where it was it was 5 episodes, and so you had to watch The Flash on Monday and Arrow on Tuesday.
Yeah, because it all lines up.
It all lines up, and they're all parts of the same series. But there was a bit, and I watched the whole thing, even though I hadn't been watching them for years. But there was one episode where it showed you. It just basically did like a nod to all the DC universes, and there was a universe called there was a universe called, they're all numbered.
Right.
So like Universe
Yeah.
50, what was it called? There was Universe 66 was the one that had it's there for like Universe 66 is there for like 20 seconds, and it's Burt Ward, who's now in his like late
Oh, of
50s,
course.
walking his chihuahua,
Hmm.
and the sky turns black, and he just looks up and it turns red, sorry, and he goes, "Holy crimson skies!" And then that's all you get. And there's
That's all you need.
yeah, and there's like Universe 99, Universe 89, which I think has got it's the guy that played Bullock in the original 1989, the Tim Burton movie.
Right.
He's there for a bit, and like, oh my god, we need Batman, and just all these different universes. But there is a universe in there where the Titans and Swamp Thing are there for a second. And like,
Right. Okay.
recognizing that there's other studios putting DC stuff out there is pretty cool.
Yeah. That's cool.
But I think a lot of the Doom Patrol stuff in particular was very inspired by Mark Waid stuff. Just writes it just seems to have got involved in everything. Kingdom Come and Gotham by Gaslight are not just not massively into the DC stuff, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I know John Bruce and I know Andrew have talked about Kingdom Come in the past as being like the DC book. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And we're down to the final two, in no particular order. I'll go with number 2, Neil Gaiman. So obviously we talk about him weekly without anyone really realizing that's what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
you love Neil Gaiman. Everyone loves Neil Gaiman. Did you like that?
Yes.
Did you like that film Coraline? That was Neil Gaiman, based on a book by Neil Gaiman. Did you like The Graveyard Book? It was him as well. He wrote The Graveyard Book.
Stardust.
Did you like Stardust? That was the next one on the list. Did you like Stardust? He wrote the book. Did you like American Gods? He wrote the book.
Yeah.
That episode of Doctor Who where the TARDIS becomes a lady from that becomes that lady from that TV series Dr. Foster. He wrote that. His comic series, The Sandman, and its spin-offs have won 26 Eisner Awards. It's one of the best comics. It's one of the best comics ever. If you're a fan of The Cure and you haven't read it while listening to Disintegration and drinking Rioja, then you can fuck off. He's read everything for everywhere. Do yourself a favor, watch Sandman, then check out the comic, then spend the next 10 years reading Gaiman's works and giving into that gothic part of your soul. Just an absolute legend. Absolute legend. Like you're saying, all his stuff's adapted. His stuff's been adapted everywhere. There's films based on his work. There's TV series based on his work. He's written books that then Dave McKean drew, and then Dave McKean directed the film. So have you ever seen the film or heard of the film Mirror Mask?
No.
Pretty cool. I watched it. I watched it when I was in uni, and then when I was researching, I watched it at like a uni event and like 20 people in a cinema in Stirling, and then I remember doing my revision for interviewing Dave McKean, and then I was like, "Oh, Mirror Mask was a Neil like Mirror Mask was directed by Dave McKean. That's cool." And just left at that. I was like, "Oh, so Dave McKean directed that movie." I saw it at uni, so I just thought he was a comic artist, and I was like, "Oh, Mirror Mask is a book written by Neil Gaiman." So it's pretty cool. Yeah, you guys are a total legend. Please check out while we're saying this. I mentioned Dave McKean. Check out his frequent collaborator. Dave McKean's a really good guy as well, and you should check out. He's drawn some. He'll probably be in our artist list that we do soon. But yeah. I don't know what else we could say about Neil Gaiman that we haven't said already. Like
if you have the chance, listen to his audiobooks because he narrates all of them. And it's just brilliant just to listen to him tell you stories. Just it's something else. It's really I'd love it if he would just narrate like all books. I would love him just to tell me all the stories.
So when you click on audio options, you've got like English, French, Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, Neil Gaiman's narrated 50 Shades of Grey. Go on then.
No, he is some guy. As a Stardust is great. Like
yeah.
I don't know how accurate this is, but if you just kind of like, do you think about like where these ideas started and when they're created, and then what they spun off? So like. Without him writing Stardust, you wouldn't have that really awesome song by Take That. Like, the That you and me, we can ride on the sky.
Okay,
That
I
was
never
the
noticed that connection. I was going to say, I thought you were going to say we wouldn't be introduced to Charlie Cox, but
oh, and Charlie Cox, yeah.
exactly,
Everyone's Daredevil, yeah.
exactly.
Oh, exactly. Good point, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
and just things like that. That episode of I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. That episode of Doctor Who that he wrote was a total
right.
event for me because it was like my favorite book and comic writer of the time writing my favorite TV show, and it was a banger, like a total banger. And then the cast the girl from Dr. Foster, whose name escapes me. She was also in she's in Smith and Bailey as well, like that. Just some loads of other stuff. And I was like, oh, she's a really quirky person to be playing. She effectively like Michael Sheen, or the voice of Michael Sheen was
Yeah.
was an AI that took over the TARDIS by pushing the consciousness of the TARDIS out, and the TARDIS managed to find itself in the body of this woman. So she's like effectively the soul of the TARDIS trapped in a woman's body, and it's just really, really smart. I was like, Neil Gaiman, this is brilliant. You've written a cracking piece of Doctor Who here. He's also just written Doctor Who novels as well.
Yeah.
Like he's such a prolific writer. That leaves us to number one. Don't be raging. I'm sorry I didn't include your favorite writers, but that's why we changed it to just 10 writers you should check out, because they are great writers, and there's so many more to go. And we'll probably do this list over and over again. Probably work out a way to cut it down to less than 40 minutes, because this is supposed to be a 10-minute portion of a video on YouTube. But oh well. So the last writer I wanted to talk about, number one, is John Lees. Okay, so here's a conversation that happened 5 years ago. Hey Jeff, hi Colin. Read this comic. What is it? The best Scottish comic book ever written. Yeah, okay, whatever, Colin. John Lees is a comic book writer based in Glasgow, Scotland. His works include Sync, which is the best Scottish comic book ever written. John's first published comic, The Standard, launched worldwide in January 2013. He then did a breakout comic in 2014 called And Then Emily Was Gone. Every year since then, he's brought out something else. He brought out Oxymoron, The Loveliest Nightmare in 2015. He brought out Quilt, which was a one-shot for 2016's Halloween Fest. He wrote for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Universe in 2017. And then, also in 2017, he released the Glasgow-based crime thriller Sync, which launched in comic shops worldwide in September 2017, was John's most successful comic, and is one of the most outstanding comics ever. It's so good. We talk about it almost weekly on the podcast, if not twice weekly. John's a really good guy. We will tell anybody that is trying to get into comics but is looking for something different to check out Sync. There's been conversations about your favorite. I've been in conversations about your favorite comic panel ever in a comic, and I've been able to turn around and say the end of issue 7 of Sync. I think it's issue 7 of Sync. The last panel of that comic is my favorite panel in any comic. It's the one time I've read a comic and actually woke my wife up, because I've been so excited by what I've read that I've went, oh fuck, and then my wife's going, what? And I'm like, oh, just this comic I've read. It's about a fictional suburb of Glasgow, Sync, a fictional suburb of Glasgow, which is an amalgamation of all the horrible urban legends that mums in Glasgow used to tell their kids to keep them safe, like be back before dinner, otherwise the clown ice cream van will come and get you, and that kind of stuff. So John's a really good guy. We've had him on the podcast a couple of times. We've hung out with him at Comic Cons. He has noted in the past that folk keep coming over and saying, I've been told to check out your book, and he's like, was it the Brewgooders that sent you? And like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, they do that. But going on from there, he wrote an anthology series called Hotel, spelled Hotell, which is a horror anthology series set in a motel on Route 66. it's phenomenal. Everyone should check it out. It was one of the 4 launch titles for AWA Upshot, which was effectively John breaking America. So he got to be one of the first 4 titles of AWA's Upshot, which is a major new publishing company headed by former Marvel editors Axel Alonso and Bill Jemas. So yeah, to be one of the flagship titles of a new comic series, of a new comic company is pretty amazing. And in 2021, one of my favorite books, he launched The Crimson Cage, which is a retelling of Shakespeare's Macbeth, which is set against the backdrop of the 1980s territorial system of pro wrestling in the southern states of the United States of America. It's just brilliant. It's really, really good. Just really good. John's writing makes you feel every emotion. I've cried, but I've also punched the air in triumph reading the same book. Just really, really good. Everyone should be checking out John Lees's stuff. Particularly if you're Scottish, there's something. There's a unique voice in there that I think I say that, but then John told me that like his work's really popular in certain parts of the United States. Like particularly Sink in particular, he says he's got a bit of a cult following in the northeast of the United States, despite the fact that it's a very Glaswegian book series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Often, and also I have to hand it there, but he has referred to us, and it's on the back of the Brewgooders anthology. He has referred to us as Scotland's premier beer and comics podcast.
Congratulations!
Cheers, man. When your favorite comic writers remarks that you're doing quite good it's pretty good. That was our top 10. I will post them up on the list for folk to debate. If your favorite comic book writer wasn't there, let me know. If you want me to do another list and want me to include certain people or omit certain people, let me know. But yeah, that for us was 10 names that I collectively, if there was a couple in there that I just wanted to put in because they're my favorites. But and I googled shit. We asked the question on Facebook. We talked about it on the group chat, and that was the 10 names that kind of I felt could be highlighted without anybody kicking the shit out of me. So
there you go.
Yeah. Next week, I'm hoping to do breweries or something to that effect. Something
I was worried in case you're like, right, sure, your turn for the list next week. And I would come up and say, right, the 10 best beers in my fridge.